UN 영어뉴스. What US agents knew before a Sikh separatist was killed in Canada. The Canadian police are still investigating the June murder of Mr. Nijar. US prosecutors have charged an Indian man with a plot to kill at least 4 Sikh separatists in North America. The indictment links the case to the murder of a Canadian citizen earlier this year and has prompted questions about what US agents knew in the days before his death. On 18 June, Nikhil Gupta watched a video of a Sikh separatist leader who had been shot dead in Canada in his car, his bloody body slumped over the steering wheel. Mr. Gupta then forwarded the video to a man he is accused of hiring as a hitman for another murder in a different country. On the phone the next day, Mr. Gupta told the man that the Canadian activist had been a target. Hashtag #4, #3 on a list. We have so many targets, Mr. Gupta said. The good news is this. Now no need to wait. Those alleged conversations were outlined in an indictment unsealed by US prosecutors on Wednesday. The US Justice Department has charged Mr. Gupta with an elaborate plot to assassinate a dual US-Canadian citizen based in New York, a plot allegedly directed by an Indian government employee. While the target was not named by prosecutors, US media reported it was Gopatwant Singh Tannun, a dual US-Canadian citizen and a member of a US-based Sikh separatist group. That particular scheme was thwarted. The hitman in New York, who Mr. Gupta allegedly agreed to pay $100,000, was in fact an undercover agent. But the 15-page charging document also provides new details on the attack that did succeed, the fatal shooting of Hardeep Singh Nijar in British Columbia. These details raise fresh questions about that murder on Canadian soil, about who knew what and when. The Sikhs protested across Canada after Mr. Trudeau suggested India was involved in Mr. Nijar's murder. The brazen killing of Mr. Nijar, a 45-year-old leader who campaigned to establish a Sikh state independent of India, shocked Canadians. The murder also spun into a diplomatic disaster a few months later. In September, when Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said there were credible allegations that India had been involved, Mr. Trudeau's accusation, dismissed by India as absurd, widened a growing rift between the two countries, and the Prime Minister faced pressure to reveal some of the evidence behind his claims. Speaking on Wednesday, Mr. Trudeau said only that the US charges emphasized India's need to take Canada's allegations seriously. But experts say the US indictment has added weight to his claims. Today's proof goes a lot further than what Trudeau said in September. Stephanie Carvin, professor of international affairs at Carleton University in Ottawa, told the BBC, "This makes it clear there was a conspiracy to kill 4 individuals, 3 in Canada, The killing of Mr. Nijjar was not a one-off. At the time of Mr. Trudeau's allegation, the public response from Canada's closest ally seemed muted. US officials expressed concern over the incident, but stopped short of either echoing Mr. Trudeau's claims or condemning India outright. We now know the White House knew of the US investigation into the murder for hire plot weeks before Mr. Trudeau went public after the G20 summit in India. A senior administration official confirmed that President Joe Biden had raised concerns with his Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi, at that same global meeting. There's a big target in Canada. Mr. Gupta, US officials allege, was involved in international narcotics and weapons trafficking before he was recruited by an Indian government official in May 2023 to arrange the assassination. Mr. Pannun, an associate of Mr. Nijjar, is the General Counsel for Sikhs for Justice, an organization based in the US that supports the broader Khalistan movement, which calls for an independent homeland for Sikhs, who make up about 2% of India's population. The movement was at its peak in the 1980s in the state of Punjab, which witnessed several violent attacks and deaths. It lost traction after armed forces ran special operations against the movement, which is now banned in India. But supporters in the diaspora have continued their course for a separate state. Mr. Pannun, like Mr. Nijjar, has been designated a terrorist by India, charges they both denied. For weeks, the indictment alleges Mr. Gupta tracked and monitored Mr. Pannun, following orders from the Indian government employee, who described himself in communications as a senior field officer with training in battlecraft. The document reveals how US law enforcement infiltrated the alleged plot, setting him up with a phony hitman who was actually an undercover agent. As the alleged murder plot moved forward, Mr. Gupta alluded to a long list of targets that would follow the assassination of Mr. Pannun. More jobs, he said in a June phone call cited in the indictment. Those prospective jobs included cross-border operations. On 12 June, Mr. Gupta told the US law enforcement source there was a big target in Canada. 6 days after that, on 18 June, Mr. Nijjar was shot dead by 2 gunmen wearing dark clothes with hoods outside a Sikh temple in Surrey, British Columbia. Canada's National Police Force, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, are still actively investigating Mr. Nijjar's death and offered no comment in the wake of the US indictment. US prosecutors do not allege any of the accused plotters were involved in that crime, but claim Mr. Gupta and his Indian handler discussed it in the immediate aftermath. Mr. Gupta told the Indian government employee he wished he had personally carried out the killing, according to the indictment. Soon after, he called the U.S. law enforcement source, identifying Mr. Nijar as the potential Canadian job he had referenced days earlier. "This is the guy. I send you the video," Mr. Gupta said. "Some other guy did this job." And the court documents suggest Mr. Nijar's mother seemed to spur Mr. Gupta on. He told the U.S. source that Mr. Pannun's murder should be done quickly, and after that was done, Mr. Gupta allegedly said they had 3 more jobs to do before the end of June, all 3 in Canada. A question of actionable intelligence. The details included in Wednesday's indictment have raised new questions about the threats to Canadians, including Mr. Nijar. Mr. Nijar was reportedly warned by Canadian law enforcement that his life was in danger soon before he was killed, but it's unclear how much that warning was informed by U.S. intelligence on the threat to Canadian citizens gathered through the undercover operation. It strikes me as extremely unlikely that any information available to the FBI wouldn't have been made known almost immediately to Canadian authorities. Wesley Walk, a senior fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation, told the BBC. He described the Canada-US law enforcement relationship as very tight and very close. The more likely story, he said, was that there was less actionable intelligence details that could be reliably acted upon in the case of Mr. Nijar compared to the case of Mr. Pannun. But why was the US able to thwart a murder plot while Canada was not? I think it would be too soon to assume that there was some kind of major breakdown of law enforcement or intelligence on the Canadian side in terms of trying to protect Mr. Nijar, he said. The reality may be scarier, Mr. Wack said. The U.S. indictment, combined with Mr. Trudeau's allegations, suggests there may have been multiple hit teams on the loose, with one able to evade detection and carry out its mission. On Wednesday, the White House confirmed it had raised the alleged plot with the Indian government at the most senior levels, adding that Indian officials responded with surprise and concern. The Indian government said it had launched an investigation into security concerns raised by the U.S. in relation to the plot, but neither the U.S. or India will want to undermine their budding diplomatic relationship, said Professor Carvin, the international affairs expert. I strongly suspect there were a lot of calls from Washington to Delhi to try and sort this out as quietly and quickly as possible, she said. While we wait for any diplomatic fallout, Wednesday's revelations have already offered validation to Canadian Sikhs, said Gurpreet Singh, a Sikh journalist and radio host based in British Columbia. People generally feel vindicated because this is what we've been saying for a very long time, that the Indian government is interfering, that they are trying to muzzle voices of dissent, he said. In a way, Hardeep Singh Nijar has been vindicated posthumously.